Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth, and I will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we are talking about how much should you spend on marketing. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, and Voyager U, a community to build your independent work life. To participate in the comments section today, make sure you are watching on YouTube. And while you're there, please hit the subscribe and, if you would, the like button. You can submit questions as well as get the email address for our speaker today. Also, remember that you can catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and many others. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's guest, Pete Steege, founder of B2B Clarity. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, Rick. So great to be here.
Yes, and again, a reminder, if you're in YouTube, you can put questions for Pete and I into the comments field. You also can see Pete's email address there, but if you would like to write it down, it is pete.steege, Steege, at b2bclaritymarketing.com. All right, Pete, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your firm, and the various things that you're up to these days.
Sure. Rick, I have been a B2B marketer for my whole career, almost 30 years, worked in a lot of different size firms through that time. And now I formed B2B Clarity, and I help CEOs and other leaders of small B2B businesses who don't have a marketing leader on their team find success. That's my focus. And I do that in three ways. One is I'm a fractional CMO, so I help them on an ongoing basis be that leader in their business. Secondly, I have a 30-day package that I offer to give them a marketing blueprint for their business, where we go through and understand their needs and give them that roadmap for their marketing. And then third, I'm an instructor and coach at the B2B Growth Club, which is the new B2B business community. I have a master class on how to build a thought leadership program, and also I'm coaching clients in that space.
And then we talked a little bit as we were gearing up for today's session in your spare time, not that there's a lot with all that stuff going on, but you mentioned that you like to do some home improvement projects. I know we're looking at some of them in the background, and then you also mentioned you enjoyed spending time up at your cabin.
Yeah, it's a real fun place. It's a one-room schoolhouse that we've turned into a cabin. Really enjoy it.
On again, the home improvement stuff, tell us a little bit about some of the things you've done there.
Well, I just love taking old houses and making them into something usable and new. And we found this one-room schoolhouse on the side of a road on a trailer for sale. We moved it to some land and took 3 years to turn it into just a really fun space with a upstairs bunkhouse and a wood stove. And it's just a great little retreat. Very simple and old school, but it's been a real fun project for us.
Cool. All right, shifting gears and going to marketing. Let's start with the marketing budget. Talk a little bit about why setting the budget is important and why companies get off track if they just try to wing it.
Well, Rick, I think the first reason it's a challenge for companies is it's really hard to know what the right amount is to spend on marketing. There's so many different opinions and data points on that. So it's hard to even know, first of all. And secondly, marketing is, maybe uniquely to other parts of people's business, is really hard to standardize, right? There's so many ideas out there. It seems like every week there's a new buzzword for marketing on things that you should be doing or you might be doing. And you have consultants that are talking about all kinds of different best practices. So in this flurry of ideas, it's so easy for companies to start doing things, do the tactics without first figuring out what the overall right is in terms of the investment. And you end up with this pile of tactics and activities that you're not really sure why you started them all and which ones are most valuable. So it's a real common problem. And that's why taking the time to figure out, even if it's not perfect, what a spending level is that fits your business in your market and your team too.
And then again, a reminder to everybody, if you are on YouTube, you can submit your questions. We've already gotten a few, and I'm going to weave those into the conversation, and Pete and I will try to get to those as they fit into the flow of our conversation. And right off the bat here, Bronson asked a question. It ties right into what we just covered there on the budget. How can somebody in the organization, probably a marketing person, convey to management of, in particular, small and mid-sized businesses, the importance of marketing and having that marketing budget?
Yeah, well, that's a great question because again, for a financial person or a business, a product person, it's not always clear, what the direct value of marketing is. And I think the best approach is to find a way to translate that marketing spend to what matters to the business, to the revenue numbers, the profit numbers, the growth numbers, right? Not that that's easy, but that's really worth the investment to try to make a linkage to that so that those parts of the business can get the value of marketing.
Sure. And then the value of marketing, a little easier to see when you can tie it to some of these benchmarks. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the benchmarks for marketing spending and how they differ depending on the type of company.
Sure. So yeah, benchmarks are a great place to start when it comes to figuring out your marketing spend level. The benchmark that's most available and the one I would suggest companies use as a way to figure out that marketing level is percent of revenue. So however much you're spending on revenue, what percent of that revenue are you going to commit to marketing? And just as a starting place for everybody out there, the overall average, is a benchmark that from a report called the CMO study, I think, where they check with a whole bunch of different companies. So overall, every possible market size company, it's about 10%. Now, what's interesting is the number in February was 8.6%, and that was a year ago. That was before COVID, obviously, right? And in June, during the COVID, it was up to 11.4%. Well, what does that mean? It means that people are compensating for the drop in revenue and still keeping that investment in marketing up. And that's why it went up to 11.4%, because they didn't want to cut their marketing as their bit to the same level that their business contracted. But in general, at 8 to 9%, if you look over the past several years, that's about what the overall average is. Now, overall averages don't really help somebody with a specific business know what they need to spend, but it is a really good starting place to understand, kind of sanity check, ballpark area where you want to start. So from there, I'm going to give you a few more benchmarks that help you directionally to say, okay, given that 10% is a starting place, should I be spending more or less than that? So it depends on, are you selling a product? Are you selling a service, right? Products tend to require, on average, less marketing than services. Are you in B2B? Are you in B2C? You can see here that consumer B2C businesses tend to spend more on marketing than B2B. Now, these numbers, I think at this point, you need to start thinking relatively, right? Rather than saying, oh, well, I'm a B2B product business, so I should be spending 8% of my revenue on marketing. That's really not the way to use this discussion or these numbers. You need to do the work of saying, okay, I know what the industry is doing, and I know the kind of company I am, and so therefore I'm going to adjust my number this way or that way. And I want to give you one more way you can adjust your number: what industry you're in. It's another way. So here's some examples from tech being very high to manufacturing averaging much lower as a percent of revenue. Depending what industry you're in affects how much you're spending on marketing. And then finally, another set of benchmarks is how big is your business? Again, you can't say it's always this way, but in general, very small businesses, if you have an established customer base, meaning you know who your customers are and you're probably not needing to find new customers, and you have an established transaction with them, that's probably the least revenue requirement for a typical marketing spend. The Small Business Association has their stats on small businesses overall under 5 million revenue, and that's 7 to 8%, which is a little less than that overall average, but again, not that much.
Sure. And at Brimacombe Capital, we do a chunk of our investing in software as a service companies. And so inside of technology, for example, again, because that's where we participate most often, you're going to see, like you said, different unique characteristics, and those numbers might be a little higher, a little lower based on the categories that you're in.
Right. One last thing I want to say on benchmarks is you have to think about apples to apples, right? So one recommendation I make is when you find a benchmark, add 20% to that benchmark. Why is that? If you look at the way people count, so they survey a bunch of companies, right? And on average, is about 80% of the true spending of marketing that people are including in those numbers. Some include more, some include less, but on average, it's about 80%. For example, they might be including their spend for advertising and for marketing programs, but they might not be counting their salary for a marketer, or even somebody in sales that's spending some time on marketing, right? So I'd recommend you add 20%. And then secondly, we already touched on this, but don't think about your numbers in the midst of challenges you might have had for COVID. So if you were compressed in revenue, I encourage you to think about the level pre-COVID, because hopefully this is a transitive situation, and you really do want to, marketing doesn't change on a dime in terms of its impact. So you really want to maintain that investment for the future, really.
We had a question that came in from the audience from Zach. Pete, what do you do with things like sales spiffs? Do you layer that into the marketing costs as well, or do you keep that separate?
Different people do it different ways. My philosophy and belief is you would want to layer that in, and the reason why is marketing is really about customer relationship overall. That's the way I define it in a big way. So think of the customer journey from the very first time they hear of you through to they are an advocate, right? A longtime customer. All the experiences that they have, marketing has the responsibility to manage that experience and optimize it, right? So sales spiffs are part of the incentive for your sales team, in my view. That said, it certainly varies, and for your model, your business model, that might not be the right thing for you to do. I encourage you, rather than thinking of the tactic and where it fits, think of that customer journey. And if it's part of enhancing the customer journey, I recommend looking at that all as one budget.
Okay. And then, I suppose before I move on, a reminder for everybody, you can submit questions. Obviously, we've gotten to a couple of here. Bronson, thanks for contributing. Zach, thanks for contributing. But put those in the comments field. We will get to those to the extent that we can. All right, so let's jump from these benchmarks to the actual marketing spend. So you've given us some guidance as to what some benchmarks are, but then how do we extrapolate from that and pick the right level of spending for a particular kind of business?
Yeah, benchmarks aren't enough, right? So what I actually recommend is a 3-step process. Starts with the benchmarks, which gives you a starting place. Then you need to look at wildcards for your business. And I can talk about those, Rick, but these are the things that make your business, right? That's unique. And how do you adjust that number you came up with in the benchmark work to make it customized for your business, where you're at today? And then finally, even when you have that number, you need to then do a sanity check on it based on where you're actually at today, how much you're spending, who your team is and those things too.
Okay. So you brought up wild cards. Maybe talk a little bit about what they are and how you might adjust for them.
Sure. So here's some real typical ones. First of all, growth stage. Growth marketing is an investment in growth often, right? So if you are planning to have aggressive growth for your business, then that is you're going to need to have more marketing than a company that's not intending to grow, because finding and acquiring customers is an investment in marketing usually. New versus current clients. That's a really important aspect that people forget. Is marketing isn't just about finding leads, right? For some companies, depending on their model, their existing customers, their current customers, are really by far the most valuable source of new business for them. So that's a different investment in marketing than if you're out there looking for new ones. All else equal, if you know your client and they know you, your marketing level is probably going to be less than if most of your clients are ones you need to introduce yourself to and they need to get to know you. I want to mention thought leadership too as a bonus. Companies with strong thought leadership programs, that's a powerful marketing. It's not a substitute. It's actually, I think it's marketing, right? But it plays the role of marketing in a very, very potent way. My favorite example is Elon Musk. He's got a brand out there, right? He has a car company that's worth more than Ford or GM, and they do not do car ads. Ford spends $2 billion a year on advertising that Elon Musk doesn't. So there's an example of the value from a marketing perspective of thought leadership. So think about your thought leadership. Is that something that is strong today, or you want to use that as a strategy going forward? That will, in theory, lower your marketing budget need. And then finally, I want to mention what I view as not a wild card in spending, and that is online versus offline marketing. I think it's real easy for people to think, oh, online, that's cheaper. I get a bigger reach. It's the new way, so I can spend less there. My experience is, first of all, you don't know what tactics you need at the point you're setting your budget. You need to set your budget based on the things we've talked about. And then as you figure out where marketing can help your business, you choose online or offline tactics. And my experience is that online is not an opportunity to save money. It's an opportunity to do the right marketing in the right place than it is about doing things for free, so to speak.
Sure. So again, I know that we've already had some audience participation, but we have room for more. So submit your questions if you're in YouTube in the comments field. So Sarah K, longtime listener, thanks Sarah for your ongoing support. Look forward to seeing you again post-COVID. Miss getting together with you. She was asking about the marketing for new versus the sustaining product. You touched on it a little bit there, but maybe you could just drill into that a little bit more.
Sure, absolutely. And I can even share, I think what we talked about was, if you have a new business or a new product or a new customer set, new market, those investments in marketing are going to be higher than if you're already known by your market or their product is a known entity, right? Some data to back that up. There's benchmarks out there, and I'm sorry, the source doesn't come to me right away, but they show that spending for businesses that are new, the benchmark is 12 to 20% of revenue, whereas established companies, the benchmark is 6 to 12% revenue. So that kind of supports that comment that I just made before. And so I think all else equal, you need to spend more when you're establishing yourself in the market than when you're already a known entity.
Sure. Another question came in from the audience. Zach actually had a couple of questions today and has been a loyal supporter of our Club E channel here. So thanks, Zach, for participating today. He wanted to know, how do you try to get your arms around how much to spend in the different categories, for example, digital versus print or some of the other things you might do. So So how might, within an overall marketing spend, might you allocate dollars within the category?
So my recommendation, the way to handle that is save that decision for later than you normally would think you need to. So what I mean by that is, first, we talked about the customer journey. First, you need to figure out what's your customer experience that wins, right? What is it you want your customers to experience all the way through that journey? And then do a reality check and compare that to where you are today. And that's where you find your priorities for marketing investment. Where is it they're getting stuck? Where is it they're having friction? Where is it that, that it's not working, the conversion's not happening? That's when you can look at that problem and say, well, to solve that, I now can look at my options, and some of them are going to be online and some of them are going to be offline. And that's the better way than saying at the beginning, okay, I have a budget that's this big and I'm going to spend 40% of it online or 70% of it online. If you haven't first thought about what you want marketing to do for you, you're going to fall victim to that very first issue we talked about that you're doing before you know why you're doing it, right? And that's the most important thing you can do.
Okay. Another question came in from Eric. Eric would like to know, Pete, what do you do with marketing methods and channels in the sense of will they transition again on the other side of COVID? So we kind of have pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, and will these changes that happened in 2021 be ongoing, or do you think we're going to evolve again post-COVID?
Maybe there's two answers there, I think. One is what's going to happen with COVID and the market. And I have less of a maybe experienced opinion on that. I think, I'm kind of optimistic. I believe that things are in a good enough state that they're kind of dormant. And while some things will be different, the activity level is coming back with a vengeance. That's maybe it's a hope, and if that's true, then what I said before is probably the right approach, that you of course need to look at how the world's changed, but in general, you don't want to, in that view, you wouldn't want to say, I'm going to plan on a stilted world, right? You need to think about how things were, and then how they will be again, slightly adjusted, and then how does my marketing support me in that?
Okay. And then at Brimacombe Capital, we've had a lot of luck with having marketing dashboards where we were tracking multiple things across the marketing front, helped us kind of weave everything together in a little bit of a more coherent strategy, also allowed us to test some things, what was working, what wasn't working, what was happening to our customer acquisition costs, how was that playing with lifetime value, things like that. Maybe talk a little bit about marketing dashboards and maybe some of the key metrics that you track and are kind of your personal favorites.
Sure thing. I'm a big fan of of numbers, right? Doing things for a reason. It's, again, in marketing, it's just essential, and it's great that you guys are doing that. Given what I said before, and so my approach starts with that journey, understanding what it is you're asking marketing to do for your business, right? What's the job you're hiring marketing to do? And you should be able, with that view, you should be able to be pretty specific. So I know that I have a target of this customer type, for example, very specific enough that you can list companies that fit in that category, region, industry, size, whatever it might be. So for that number of customers, clients, prospects, I need them to be aware of me. So what would that look like? What does success look like for them to be aware of me? One number that I use that comes from Unified Funnel Management is they need to be exposed to my brand 7 times in a certain amount of time. So now you have a very specific, quantifiable, measurable metric, right? That you can figure out what you should do to achieve that, and then see if you did achieve that. That's an example. So on that awareness side, impressions is high for me. On interest, for me, it's about hand raises, right? They are actually saying, hey, I want to talk to you. That's however you measure that, that's a specific, and you want to be very specific, but that's what you're measuring. I like close rate for purchasing. Um, Customer lifetime value is another really big one. This gets back to existing customers versus current customers. For a lot of businesses, people miss this, right? So much of your opportunity is with a customer that's going to buy again and again and again. And how many times are they going to buy? And how frequently are they going to buy? And what is it that triggers that new purchase, right? Those are some really important. In that case, it's as much a metric about your program as it is about understanding your customer, right? So customer surveys is a great tool to get that understanding.
Talk a little bit more. You mentioned unified funnel management. That is the tool used by Voyager U, a sponsor for Club E. Why don't we give them a little shout out? Tell folks just a little bit more. Yeah, tell folks just a little bit more of their offering and why you like it and how you use it.
Sure. So Voyager U is it's a great community that I'm part of. For me as a marketer, what I love about it, especially, it's for people more than just marketers. But as a marketer, what I like about it is the ideas in the unified funnel metrics literature, I guess you call it, where it's a lot of what I've already described, but it's a way to manage your business from a marketing perspective that looks at that overall customer funnel and helps you focus on the specific metrics that matter to your business. And one size does not fit all. So I can't tell you what the metrics are for your business, but by following that Voyager U approach, I'm able to help clients come figure out what is the needle in the haystack in terms of marketing that's going to really make a difference for my business. And what are the things I don't, even though they have a lot of noise in the market, I'm not going to get a lot of bang for that buck. So I'm not going to waste my time or money on that. Okay. That's the biggest thing for me.
All right. And then while we're doing shout outs, might give you a little bit of an opportunity. You mentioned that you do fractional CMO work early on in the introduction. Maybe just give folks in the audience a little bit of a flavor for what kind of an ideal client is for you.
Thank you. And for me, who I can help the most are small to mid-sized B2B businesses that don't have a marketing leader on staff. As simple as that. So a CEO that's running their business and they're having to figure out the marketing and run the agency work or help the junior marketing person, or maybe it's the sales VP that is responsible for marketing and really is focused on sales. I'm able to be that marketing leader, time shared, right? So it's on average it's about a 20% FTE for these companies, and it gives them that marketing direction and leadership and management to fill that role for them so they can focus on their business.
Great. Again, reminder to everybody that if you're in YouTube, you can submit your questions. I have another one here from Bronson. Good, I think a fabulous question, especially with the world we're in. Things are changing so fast. Bronson's question was, if a marketing budget was already approved in Q4 for 21, when and how should you revisit that budget to make sure that it's allocated properly? So you create a budget, life changes, now you need to reevaluate or not. And what does a company do in that situation?
A great question. A couple of data points there. One is you talked before about metrics and dashboards. I think a good marketing practice is a more frequent than changing the budget, but a frequent, periodic, measurement and understanding of progress on goals. The second data point I would use that comes into this is I'm a big fan of EOS as well, and that quarterly cadence. To me, quarterly and yearly, to this question is to me a really pretty good time frame to say, how are we doing? This is what we thought was going to happen. This is what we said we were going to do. Where are we at? What's changed in the market? How did those things we said we do get done or not? and then there's a tweak there that happens. I think that's important. The world doesn't run on an annual cycle.
All right. Thank you for jumping in that. Reminder to everybody, you can put your questions into Pete and I here today. We'll try to get to it. Also, please hit the subscribe button. And if you're enjoying our conversation, the like one as well. That will allow us to deliver more content like this to you in the future. All right, so back to our marketing budgets. We've gone through the process of looking at our business, came up with some benchmarks. We tried to assess some wild cards. We're kind of drilling down and deeper. Does that give us now enough to actually have a marketing spending goal, or do I have to even dig in further?
We're close. We're very close. The final step that I recommend is this reality check. So what do I mean by that? Change is hard. So let's say that you did this work and all the numbers are telling you you should be spending about 10% of revenue on marketing. And today you're spending 2% on revenue on marketing. My recommendation is don't jump to 10% right away. On average, my experience is at max, you should probably think about doubling your spend in a year. Not to say that given your situation, there might be an exception to that. You might need to do that, but all else equal, you're going to be more effective and more successful if you grow at a manageable change at a manageable rate, right? And work towards closing that gap and go to 4% maybe this year, right? Likewise, if you're overspending on marketing, which I have to say, I haven't seen that too many times, but if you were, then I also recommend don't drastically cut what you're doing, because that tends to also be just destructive, right? So in that case, all else equal, rule of thumb is at most cut what you're doing in half. Okay. So with those steps, now I think, you are at a point where you've got a budget, you've got a planning budget, right? You've got a budget to start your year to say, okay, now I know the universe and it's time to start thinking about what to fill it with.
Okay, so given that, now what do? We have that number, we've gotten this information, we've kind of done a self-assessment and figure out where we're at. What do we do to come up with a plan, and how do we improve our marketing?
So this is the point that a lot of people don't get, right? I now have an assumption. There's some based on assumptions, but I have a number, and it's a budget just like your home budget, right? And the way you do it is you start rank listing your marketing projects. As I said before, I'm a big believer in knowing what it is marketing can do for your business. And if you do that work about understanding your customer's journey and how marketing can help you, you can come up with a list of priorities and say, here's if we can only do one marketing tactic, it would be this one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And start allocating your money. And when the money's gone, then you need to have a conversation about, am I really willing to not do those ones below the line? But that's how you do it, right? And you set a budget and you have a plan and you move forward. That is so important in marketing, because that gives you a way to say no to so many, sexy, fun marketing ideas that may or may not be valuable, but you want to decide on them based on where they fit on the ranking and your budget versus how fun they sound or how great you feel about them, right? It saves money, and it also keeps you focused on showing the value of the ones you do decide, because you've decided this one's important. Why, right? You've come up with a reason. This is going to do this for my business. Well, now you have something to measure and something to test and see if it's working and adjust.
So I had a question from Matt, longtime listener. He wanted to drill in a little bit now to this budget and the seasonality. Obviously, B2C is going to do more spending around the holiday and New Year's, and B2B, there might be a buying season based on the industry. If you're in ag, like one of the Brimacombe Capital portfolio companies, Centera, drone imagery and analytics business, they're going to spend more over the winter because people aren't in the fields at that point in time. But how does one take this budget and maybe spread it out over the course of a year? What are a couple of things for folks to think about for that?
this is getting into the real role of marketing in your business, right? That is understand, because it's going to be different for every business, right? You can't say, this is what I should spend in first quarter for every business. It really could be totally opposite for two different businesses. So I don't mean that as a cop out, but to answer the question really is, what would you do to figure that out? And it gets back to the customer journey I spoke of, the market that you're targeting. If you've very clearly defined your target market and you get to know that target market, I mean, get to know them. What do they need? What do they care about? What's their year like? That's how you know what your marketing should be spent. It's not about you, it's about them. And when they're open to it, when they're making their decisions, when their spending is available, all those decisions are driven by your target addressable market.
So I know we've touched on COVID a couple of different times here today. I want to bring that back out. Oftentimes in times of uncertainty, like with COVID, marketing is often the first thing that gets cut or at least reduced. What would you say to business owners who have this knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, times are tough, I want to cut marketing?
Yeah, so first, data point. If you remember early on what I said, the data says that on average, companies don't do that, right? Because that percent revenue went up, spend went up because of the market going down. That's people saying, I'm going to hold the line to a certain extent on marketing. Why is that? I think there's three reasons. One is marketing is a slow burn. Marketing affects your audience over time. It takes time to make an impact on them. So if you drastically cut something that you've planted, the seeds you planted, and you stop watering them, you can't just turn that back on a dime, right? That time of investment is something, the continuity of it really plays a role. So that's one reason it is a bigger cost than you think in stopping your spending. The second thing is there's actually a window of opportunity here, because some people are doing that. So the noise in the market has gone down, and you now have an opportunity to have less noise out there and to make your message heard more effectively and more efficiently, right? And then the third reason is change is hard, right? Change is a driver for opportunity for businesses. So your clients, now is the time when they actually are more open to hearing from you about how you can help them, right? So this is probably the most valuable, most fruitful time for you to be sharing with them what you can do for them, because they are looking for answers right now, more so than when everything's staying the same.
And I know that things vary from company to company, industry to industry. I get that. But as you look at the various things that folks can spend money on in marketing, what do you think is the most impactful and should remain almost no matter what? So do you have a couple of favorite things that are really the foundation to a marketing program?
I think the way I'd answer that, Rick, is I mentioned it before. I think a missing piece of a lot of people miss that's really, really important is marketing to existing customers. I think people think of that as optional, and that customer experience of the people that are currently know who you are and have decided to pay you for what you do, that's a really valuable asset for you. And so I think that's, in my opinion, it depends. If you're trying to grow or you're brand new, it would be that upfront acquisition, lead acquisition, finding customers. But other than that situation, I think it's that retention, right? Customer retention, customer experience, customer satisfaction, advocacy. It's making your current customers happy. That's going to pay off that's the highest ROI, in my opinion, on marketing for anything else you do.
How about go the other direction? What do you see as the most common marketing mistake, especially in the B2B space?
I think a real common mistake is to talk about you instead of talking about your customer. So what I mean by that is, in B2B especially, we've been around for this many years. Our product has these specs. Me. I'm being a little exaggerated here, but your customer doesn't care about you. They care about how you can help them with their problem. So I've seen a real, I think it's a real good lesson for a lot of companies to stop, think about what your customer needs, understand that really clearly, and then change your words to be about solving that problem for them rather than how great you are. And I say that a little bluntly, but so a lot of people, it's more subtle how they're doing that, but you really want to make sure they're hearing what you can do to help them. That's the priority.
Kind of the old saying about people remember how you made them feel, not what you said.
Right.
What about B2C? Anything any different, or basically kind of the same message?
B2C, actually, I found the difference between B2B and B2C, there's two things that really help you understand how to do things differently. What makes them different is the buyer, right? In B2C, it's tends to be one person. In B2B, it tends to be a team of people that have to agree on something to make a decision, right? That's an important difference. And if you think of it that way, then that helps you understand what your marketing should be, because in B2C, you're focused on changing probably one person more often than a team of people. And then the second thing that makes them different, in my experience, is how they make that decision. All else equal, B2C tends to be more of an emotional decision, emotionally driven, and B2B tends to have more data and rational decision thought process going into it. Not always that way, but in general, that's the two differences. So what it means is, for B2C versus everything we said today, is B2C, you really do need to affect their spirit, right, as much as their brain, their heart as much as their brain. And in your marketing plan can in some ways be more direct and simple, because your target is a literal person target often. Whereas in B2B, it tends to be more complex. I have to figure out who's all on the buying team.
Sure. So kind of looking backward, rear view mirror, done some really interesting things in your career. As you look back, was there a specific lesson that you wish you would have learned sooner in your career?
I think it's less is more. I don't know how many, I have so many memories and experiences where I've worked large companies, small companies, and so many times we tried to overcomplicate our marketing, right? We tried to do more than we could do well, and we either didn't finish because it was a 2-year lifetime plan that we never got to because something changed in the business or the market, or we just had so many plates spinning that we didn't really know if they were working, right? So for me, I found over time that people are more successful when they focus on the really important things and then really make sure that they're working for them. Marketing effectiveness is really low overall. So if you choose to do fewer things but do them really well, you're actually going to outperform most other businesses.
That's great. Let's just stick there for a moment. Marketing effectiveness. How might somebody get their arms around that issue? Because I totally agree with you. See that a lot. Strategies aren't coherent, like you said earlier in our conversation, a little bit over here, a little bit over here. Hey, why are you doing something? Because we've always done it that way. So you hear some of these same things over and over. But if somebody was trying to measure their marketing effectiveness, how might they do that?
I think the key there is, rather than try to turn it into a financial exercise purely like a CFO would think, that's hard to do, because you're taking this marketing action over here and it's like 3 steps removed to revenue or profit, right? So what I've seen is effective is to find a metric that's closer to the actual result you're trying to achieve, and have that be the ROI of your marketing. So it's what we said before about, if my goal is to have a certain target market be aware of my business. Let's define that very crystal clear. Awareness, we're going to make some assumptions. We're going to define it as exposed to our message on online or here or there, whatever you decide, this many times in 6 months, whatever your period is, right? You've now come up with a very quantifiable, measurable, and near-term metric, right? That you are in control of achieving. So when you're done 6 months from now, you can clearly say with confidence, I did that, or I didn't, or I almost did, or I overachieved. And now that's effectiveness, right? Because it's a known, and you've seen the difference. Now you may or may not be able to later on say, well, that didn't make the difference I wanted it to for revenue later. But that's how you learn, right? You've done what you said you were going to do, and you can now see if it affects you. Versus the typical way marketing is done, to your point, whole bunch of things and just kind of hoping that sales go up, right? That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there's no accountability in that. There's no way to improve or make your effectiveness go up if you don't measure activity and results.
Absolutely, absolutely. So another audience question, and at some of our companies, Brimacombe Capital, you're often doing some rebranding work, and so this ties in rebranding with marketing, which I think is a great question. On the Brimacombe Capital front, you could go to Akoya Go, AKOYA Go, akoyago.com, and see what they've been doing from a rebranding standpoint. Looks great. But so question from the audience, the understanding that marketing should follow branding, what should growth stage companies continue with their marketing while they're doing rebranding? So in other words, how do you do rebranding at the same time as continuing to do your marketing?
Well, you need to, you need to know, first of all, be clear on when that new branding will be available, right? So you have that, because that's the change in the market. That's when you'll see something change. And then you just need to look at your tactics back to the customer journey, right? You are going to make a change, but your overall value to your customer, the words are going to change, the look might change, but you need to continue that effort and then have a planned transition to the new brand. The best brand launches are not a disruptive 180-degree shift in perception or understanding, right? Hopefully there's a logical change that you're demonstrating, so that people don't lose all of that work you've done to now, that you're improving with your new brand, but you want to make it a continuous change, right? So I guess to answer your question again, understand the schedule of that launch, commit to that, and then build a plan that manages that transition with as little disruption as possible to how they think of you, because it takes time to build that perception in their mind, and they're not going to all of a sudden throw away everything they thought of you before and think of you the new way.
Okay. All right. So we're getting close to the end here. As you reflect on our conversation, maybe there was something that we missed that you'd like to put on the table. Maybe there's something that you'd like to emphasize to a little greater degree. But if there was one key takeaway you'd like our audience to bring with them today, what would that be and why?
Rick, I'm going to say it, start with the end in mind. I think it fits this conversation, right? Budgeting is pretty commonly, marketing budgeting is something that people do later. And I think we've talked about, and what I want to leave people with is the power of doing that first, and then building a plan based on that assumption that you made, that now you can test and validate. And then the next year, you'll be that much better positioned to adjust that and improve, self-improve over time. So really just the point and the power and the value of taking the time and risk to say, this is what I believe we should be spending on marketing. Now, what's our plan?
All right, Pete Steege, thank you very much for joining us today. Pete, tell our audience what your email address is and how they can get a hold of you.
Sure, it's Pete Steege at b2bclaritymarketing.com. So pete.steege at B2B, number two, claritymarketing.com. You can reach
Pete,
me on my website there. Also, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
all right. And Pete, thank you very much for joining us today. Very good insights. I like to tell folks, I trained finance person, started off on that side. I like to say that I was on the dark side. I've come to the light side of marketing. Big fan of marketing. Brimacombe Capital, we focus on making those companies improve their marketing first and foremost. People think that can have the fastest near-term impact, and also we talked about a little bit today, bang for your buck in terms of driving the business forward. So Pete, thanks for sharing your insights, and look forward to having you back again.
Thank you, Rick. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Pete.